This episode, The Truth About Septic Systems. In this episode, the Handyman Pros will have a discussion about septic systems. The pros will dispel some common myths about septic systems and septic system ownership. Welcome to the Handyman Pros radio show. Home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros radio show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition is entitled The Truth About Septic Systems. To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, John. John, what has been going on this week?
Hey, Larry. Well, just looking forward to, this whole week, just looking forward to discussing this topic, actually.
And we do have to be careful.
Yeah, it's been a little, slow, which is fine. I'm not complaining on my side this past week. So I decided, I've got a 1991 Mustang that I've been working on. It's a GT convertible, and I said, good time to take a look at this thing, get it cleaned up. I've had it, tucked away for a little while, and that's what I've been doing. I just doing a lot of car work now, which is kind of good. It's taken me back here, of doing that. I've got to redo, the interior. It's got a leather interior. I got to get rid of that and replace that, and so on and so forth. And but it's looking good. It needs a lot of work, but I'm the original owner, and it'll be back running soon. So,
oh, there you go. That sounds like a nice, enjoyable time. I wish I had a little time off, But
yeah, well, I was listening to the radio, and actually there was a Dave Matthews song that came on,
and this is quite...
and it reminded me of let's see, when they were in Chicago and they dumped the wastewater out of the bus onto the tour boat below.
And what a perfect segue into our show.
There's my bridge. Did you like that? See what I did there? I bridged that.
That? Yeah, I saw that. I caught that. I'm telling you. Folks, there's one thing I have to say about when we do this show. We have a lot of fun. If you all could hear the things that go on in the studios before we start, you'd probably never listen to us again. But anyway, with that said, so we got on this topic largely because, John, and most of our listeners know, I dabble a little bit in real estate investment. I own rental properties, and I hear a lot of people in the real estate side of things constantly talking about, I'd never want to own a house with a septic system, and there's and we kind of laugh. I mean, in my lifetime, so I grew up on a farm, and if you've read the bio that's on our website, you know that I grew up outside of Rochester, New York, and I grew up on 60 acres on a farm, and we never had anything but septic. And John, I think you had septic starting off when you grew up in Chicago,
most of my life,
right? Yeah,
most of my life.
And so. And I've had houses with sewer as well. And so when I hear people talk about septic systems, I mean, let's just cut to the chase right now. John, when's the last time you did anything to your septic system?
I haven't. Okay, to be brutally honest here, I haven't. I do take care of it, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that.
But since I do take care of it, and I watch, what we do, and as we get into this and it unfolds, it has been relatively, and I would knock on wood. I mean, after 20 something years, it's
going. Right?
Yep.
Keeps going.
It's working well.
Yeah, and I have a very similar experience, and I tend to maintain mine a little more than you do, but that's mostly because I never worked in the septic industry, but I sold equipment into the septic industry, so I know the septic industry pretty well. It's remarkable. It's actually really a remarkable business. But one of the things that we kind of laughed, right? We laughed before the show. It's like, you flush the toilet, and what do most people think? Yep, there it goes. Well, that's about the level of their understanding, right? Would you agree with that, John? You agree with that? Yeah. I mean, folks, so...
Yeah, and thanks for asking.
Yeah. Yep, John and I are struggling with all our really bad jokes here, folks. I'm just going to tell you.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. So anyway, back to being serious about this. But most people really don't really understand how that whole process works. And so because I've had enough experience and known a ton of septic installers and septic tank manufacturers, and one of these days we're actually going to get a true professional on that'll describe much more of this stuff in detail. But I wanted to just dispel some of the myths. But I wanted to start off with a basic understanding of what's the difference between a sewer system and a septic system. And John, I think you know what the difference is. So why don't you take it and I'll see if, I doubt there's anything I'm going to disagree with. What's the difference between a sewer and a septic system?
Well, a regular septic system it's actually holding all the waste on your own property. And in my case, in a tank on the property. And in my case, where I live, the whole community is on septic, which is actually good because the way the code is written is that you have to be on at least an acre to have a septic tank.
Right.
Which means that all the houses here are very well spread out.
Right.
On a sewer, it's like you can, it's one house after another because you're connected to a city, a city type of disposal where it's going down, it's going down the pipe all the way, and the city's taking care of it.
Yeah.
And it's off your property.
And therein is the only real difference between a sewer system and a septic system is one is on-site. It does on-site waste remediation, if you want to call it that. It basically takes care of the waste on-site, and that's a septic system. And a sewer system is it's basically a pipe that hooks up to another pipe, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like storing your data on the client or on site, or it's in the cloud.
Or it's in the cloud, except it's not quite exactly the same. But anyway, a sewer system just basically is from your house. There's a pipe that runs from your house out to a bigger pipe that then takes all of your waste materials and sends it off to a processing plant that is not significantly different than your septic tank. It's larger, I will say that, and they do a few other things that your septic tank doesn't, but it's largely the same process. And that process is it goes into a big tank and it settles and they pump the solid material off and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to get into a whole discourse on that. And I'm not going to get into a discourse on why you need an acre of property, which you don't, John, that is dependent upon a lot of factors. But here in North Georgia, pretty much you're going to need at least like 3/4 of an acre to run a septic tank because the soil's real clay. And anyway, there's a lot of stuff. We won't get into that. We're going to let a professional talk about that sometime. Somebody that does it full-time does installations of septic tanks. But that's really the basic difference between sewer and septic, right? So what are some of the myths? Some of the myths, right? Oh my God, I hear it all the time. A septic system's really complicated. Man, that's just really complicated. So, John, do we want to talk all of these myths first, or do we want to dispel them one by one?
Well, let's just kind of talk. Let's kind of talk through it. When people like what you're saying earlier, Larry, is that when people are looking to buy real estate.
Yep.
And this show is really meant for people that are, if you're out there and you're looking for a new home and you're saying, well, hey, it's on a septic system. Is that good or bad? Should I fear that? Should I not fear? What is the deal? And then we can talk about the cost, the cost differences, right? Yep. We talked about that earlier before the show. Yep. But, are they really complicated? Larry, take care of them and they're not complicated.
Yeah.
I haven't had a problem. Okay.
Right.
And my neighbors haven't had a problem either that I know of. And I talk, when I talk to my neighbors, that nobody really has a problem.
Right. So complicated, when I'm referring to complicated, I literally meet people will tell me, well, it does all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, no, it actually
no, it pretty much it takes care of itself.
Yeah,
when they're properly installed,
right?
They're up and running, and they do it. They do their thing.
And we'll just get into. I'm going to get into the weeds. Literally going to get into the tank. But for a minute here. So the water runs out of your house. It runs down the pipe. It goes into a tank, into this holding tank, and it happens to be a 2-chambered tank in most cases. If it's current code, it's 2 chambers. And we won't get into all the things, but they do it by number of bedrooms and blah 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 blah. We'll get the professional guy to do that. But the water goes into the tank. It basically sits there. And what happens when you do that is there's microbes and there's stuff in there that make it work. And what happens is the solid material just basically settles out. If you take your dirty dishes, with the exception of fats, oils, and greases, if you take dirty dishes and set them in the sink with solid material in it, what happens to it, John? It settles down to the bottom, right? Same thing. And then what happens is new water comes in, the water overflows into the second tank, which is another filtering process, and more of that solid just kind of filters out to the bottom. And then it goes out into a tube out of that, and it goes out into the drain field. Well, the drain field is basically just what it says. It's a field, meaning it's got, they call them lines, but it's got lines out there. And the water just seeps out into the ground. And you say, ew, that's gross. And it's like, it actually isn't. It's actually the way that nature filters things. It's the same thing that happens in a sewage treatment plant. That's really what they do in a sewage treatment plant. They have giant septic, things. They generally don't add chemicals. They do add some. It just depends. It's a long story. But anyway, we don't want to get into those far as the weeds. But that's how complicated it is. It's basically a 2-chambered tank and a bunch of lines that go off of that. And the water comes in. The solid materials settle out, and the water goes out into the stream, and then goes out and gets absorbed into the ground, which is why, John, they say the grass is always greener over the septic tank, right? You've heard that, right?
That's what they say, Larry.
Well, it's true. It's not true here in North Georgia quite so much.
It's just in my mind after you described that. It looks like a big tank with arms, huh?
Pretty much
underground, and it's
usually a tank with a big fork off the end of it. That's kind of the way that's really how it ends up looking. It's usually a tank with usually 3 or 4. It just depends on the number of lines. Depends on the soil. There's a lot of those issues, but it just looks like a big fork off it, and then the water goes in and just flows. And it's all based on gravity. There's no pumps. You don't need a pump unless you. Well, there are. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that either. There are pump systems, but unless you got grade issues, it's all gravity fed. It's very, very natural. Requires no energy. It's been John. Question. Who invented the first septic systems? True septic systems.
Oh, you know what? My standard answer, anytime I'm asked about who invented the first anything, I got to go back to the Egyptians.
Yeah, a little later than that. It was the Romans, but close, right?
Hey, I was all right.
Yep,
all right.
it was the Romans.
One of these.
Yeah. So
there you go.
Kind of a tested technology, I think we'd say, right? It's been around for 2,000 plus years, and it works. It just works. So are they complicated? I think the answer is no. That's my opinion. They're not. They're actually quite simple. A sewer system is technically simpler because it's just a pipe that dumps into another pipe.
Yep.
But, and we'll get into this in a bit, but there's always the buts, right? So.
I saw what you did there.
Jeez.
Okay.
Folks.
So rolling on.
So getting deep.
So the next one on the list is septic systems are expensive to maintain.
Yeah, and you hear that, oh my God, I have to have it pumped.
This is the number. Let me just pause you there, Larry, and say this is the number one thing is what I hear from people about septic tanks. They're expensive to maintain. Now, when we were talking before the show, on a regular sewer system, you pay for that.
Yes,
right?
You do.
Every month. And how much were you paying for yours?
Well, so the last home that I owned was in a metro Atlanta county, and they charged, I'm just going to put it. So septic, generally municipalities charge for septic a factor of the water that you use. The county that I was in charged 4 times the amount of water was the septic bill. So if you use
the sewer bill.
The sewer bill, excuse me. Yeah. If you used a gallon of water, they charged you for 4 gallons of sewage. Now, we talk about math a lot on this show, John. How if you put 1 gallon of water in, do you get 4 gallons of water out? But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But my bills, so let me give you the comparison. So I'm on septic in the house that I'm in now, and we are now living here full time. We have a water bill that runs around $20 a month because it's just the two of us. So we spend about $20 a month. We lived full time in the last house that was on sewer, and our bill was $75 a month. That was a low month, and it ranged up from a little bit up from there, $75 to $85 a month. And we run about $20 to $25 a month here. So the differential obviously is what? 20 minus 75 is $55 a month that I paid every single month for sewer. Okay, so, and if you take that and multiply it times 12, let's just say it's 10, because I'm better at math on short, easy numbers. That's $5,500 a year. No, $550 a year. Is that right? Yeah, $550 a year.
It's been a long time since you were teaching at MIT.
Hey, that's all. Thanks. Love you long time. Yeah. Anyway, so $550 a year for my sewer system that I had using the same amount of water. And we had our tank pumped here. When did we have our tank pumped here? So we've been here 8 years. And having worked in the industry, I'm a little more proactive than John. And plus, the property that I live on is it's a lake property, and I have to be careful because there's runoff that goes into the lakes, and if we have sewer problems, septic problems here, there's other potential issues that we don't want to get into. So anyway, we had the tank pumped within the past 3 years, and it cost me about $300 to have the tank pumped. So by my rough math, that is less than 1 year's worth of sewer that I paid.
Right, and that's the point. So when people say that these things are expensive to maintain, they aren't. From an ongoing thing, from an ongoing standpoint. I haven't had mine really pumped out because I take, I put things down there in, that help it. I call them bugs, yeast, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But I haven't had a problem, so I haven't. Cost me nothing so far.
Let's just have a real quick conversation on what makes a septic system expensive to maintain. Now, do you know, John?
What does make it expensive?
Yeah, what causes problems with a septic tank? Let's run it that way.
So we had hit on this a while ago.
Yes,
what you should and shouldn't put down your sink. Now, the thing that what people get used to, and I think I hit on this before, was they get used to garbage disposals.
Yes.
And when you're on a public sewer line, people put down in there just about everything they can.
Yes.
And that causes problems for the county.
Yes.
Or the city.
As much problems for the county as it does for a septic system. Yes. That
is correct.
Yep.
Now, a septic system is going to be a little bit more delicate being on your property, and you just have to be very, very careful of what you put down there in terms of like a garbage disposal. That's the number one thing. Now, I didn't want a garbage disposal. I think that that wasn't really a recommended thing to have when you're on a septic, because you can use it, but you and once again, if you came from a sewer environment, with a garbage disposal, you got really used to throwing anything down there you wanted, and you can't do that. And so it's those wipes, it's all kinds of other things, that the fog that you keep, referring to. The grease.
Fog is fats, oils, and grease.
Right, all that kind of stuff. And once those lines that Larry was talking about coming out of the tank get clogged up, you got an issue then.
Yeah. And the fog also causes a crust over the top of the tank, which doesn't let the microbes do their job. Just so you kind of understand. And again, we don't want to make this isn't a super long discourse, but that's one of the things that makes us, or those are the things that make septic tanks very easy or very expensive to maintain. There's a couple of other things that I want to just mention that haven't been mentioned here. Do not drive on your septic field with your car. This is not a good idea. So have an idea where your septic field is, and don't go driving on it with heavy items. We get in the industry, I'll say in the industry, I used to talk to many guys, people would be putting in this was one of my favorites. They're pouring a concrete patio and the concrete truck comes and he drives over the septic field, and lo and behold, their whole septic system gets ruined because it just had 150,000 pounds of concrete truck driving over their septic fields, and it collapses the fields, and it can collapse the tank if you put too much weight on it. They're super robust, but they're not that robust, right? They're not that robust.
Stuff happens, Larry.
Stuff happens. So don't drive on your septic fields. One of the other things that septic tanks tend to do, and I talked about it a little bit earlier when I said that the grass always is greener over the top of the septic field. So the septic systems do put off the drain fields put off a lot of water. They put water out into the environment. Well, plants, particularly trees, do like water, and so the roots do tend to move into the septic fields, and you can have root problems, aka the actual reason for the name Roto-Rooter is that Roto-Rooter is a company that has a tool that gets into a line and actually cleans the roots out of the line. It's called sewer jetting. There's a bunch of other things. And the sewer companies do it too. That water will go into your sewer lines as well if you have leaks. If the lines are solid, you won't get those leaks. You won't get that intrusion. But you can even get intrusion because of it. It's pretty amazing how the tree roots will actually sniff out that water. It's a long story. It only takes a tiny
don't
bit.
Talk about sniffing.
Yeah. Hey, Ralph Cramden loved it, buddy.
Don't go there.
Ralph Cramden not Ralph. Norton loved it. Norton loved it.
Yeah, I know. Now, let me to be fair, when you live on a regular municipality sewer, the roots can get in there.
Oh, they do.
So once again, dispelling the myths of this, these things can happen either way.
Here's the difference. The city, in most cases, will come and they run at what's called a jetter or a flusher, but they run these big trucks and they grind those roots right out of there. That's what they do because they can maintain their own stuff. Now, that did bring up another thing. Well, the city takes care of it all the time. John, is that wholly true?
No. It's what's on your property.
Right. So there's a line that runs between your house and the sewer line out on the street. And folks, I hate to break it to you, that's your responsibility in most cases. In most cases. Not all cases, but in most cases. So there's a line, it's usually like a 6-inch line. It just depends on the age of the house. John, I was doing a job at one house, right? And I tell this story because it's an interesting little sewer story because I had never ever seen this. So I'm digging in the yard, and I hit this I don't know how to describe it, but my shovel made a funky noise, So I'm like, that's not good. That's not good, right? It's never good. So I very carefully dig around this thing, and here is this black
Jimmy Hoffa?
Jimmy Hoffa. I'm not sure. He might have been the septic tank. Whole long story on that one. But anyway, here's this black pipe, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I've never seen this kind of pipe. And I actually had cut through part of it with my shovel. And long story short, I broke out a little section. Well, I could tell it was septic for two reasons. One, it smelled, and two, I actually saw some things floating downstream when I heard the toilet flush inside. So I'm like, uh-oh, this isn't good. So I actually took a piece, and I have a good some very good clients of mine who I've known for like ever. And these guys they manufacture septic tanks. So I took this piece. I said, have you ever seen anything like this? And these are little older than me, gentlemen. They go, oh my God, you found Orangeburg pipe. And I'm like, what is that? He goes, well, this was an idea they had back in the late 60s, early 70s. This is a creosote covered paper pipe. And it was called Orangeburg. And they put it in for, a number of years. And he goes, basically a giant disaster because it's just paper. And he's like, I can't believe that you actually found some. I said, I can't believe I found some either. And anyway, long story short, we dug it up and replaced it with.
Did you tell me? You know how long I've been digging to find this?
I've been digging since the 70s.
But that's the life of Larry, though, folks.
But that's the life of Larry, yeah. So anyway, that's a little something. But that was going out to a sewer line. It was still solid after, I don't know how many years that was. It must have been 25, 30 years. And this creosote covered paper, and it cut through it with a shovel, pretty much like a knife through butter. Anyway,
bad idea.
Yeah, dug it up and replaced it with PVC. Yep, problem solved. But anyway, generally, everything has maintenance involved with it. I guess our point is everything has maintenance, but septic systems are not as much maintenance when you amortize them. Okay, if you don't look at what the cost is for the $300 or $400 to pump it today, and if you take that whole yearly cost of what you pay for sewer, you'll find out that septic is actually a fantastic option for owning a home from the dollars and cents standpoint. So one of the other things that I've heard many, many times is that septic systems waste water. John, have you ever heard that they're very inefficient?
I have heard that, and I don't see how.
Well, it's a bit of math. The municipalities like to sell they like to sell their sewer services, so they'll tell you that you just put that water out there and it's just gone, it just goes away. It goes back into the environment and it evaporates and it does this and it does that. Well, I've been a member, or I was a member for a long time of the GAWA. It's called GAWA. It's the Georgia On-Site Wastewater Association, and GAWA had many.
You guys must have had some great parties.
They were. I'm telling you,
ding dingers. Larry, you're really leading a life here. You're digging up all kinds of relic pipe and
it's a lot of fun.
Hanging out with these exciting plans.
So I'm gonna make a little aside about this business. The septic sewer industry is a fantastic industry to be involved in because it's a job that nobody wants, and these guys have. I mean, it's really like, well, Mike Rowe from Dirty, he created Dirty Jobs based on some of this stuff,
And basically, these guys were the first guys to bring to the forefront before COVID. Don't shake hands.
Yes, of course. Oh, they all have stories, buddy. You have no idea.
No, I get it.
Like if you're in the septic pumping business, you're not even baptized till you've been in a tank.
Oh, in a baptized.
I mean, like you're still a rookie until. Never mind. Anyway, but anyway. But the municipalities would like to tell you that these systems that they waste water and conversely that they're bad for the environment. These two things kind of go hand in hand. And the short answer is, after all the studies, the real studies, the scientific studies that go out there, they don't waste any water. In fact, they're much more efficient at putting water back into the environment than a sewer system, because the sewer system runs it down through pipes that have leaks and also get a lot of evaporation. And a sewage treatment plant is generally open tanks, and the water evaporates off into the air. It doesn't get put into the system, so water that comes from here in Georgia ends up raining someplace else. So those are just myths. They're myths. They're actually incredibly efficient, and they're wonderful. And then the last one that I hear all the time is, well, they're unsafe. Well, I guess that's relative. Are they unsafe? John, is your septic system unsafe?
No.
Yeah, yours probably is because you haven't pumped it in 20 years. But
no, you don't want to go near it.
It's not. They're incredibly safe. So modern septic tanks are made out of concrete, out of precast concrete. They generally have rebar in them, and unless the tank is in some kind of super acidic soil or something, it's not going to collapse. It's very rare. Now, older tanks, back in the 50s and things, tanks were made out of brick. Tanks were made out of, I don't even want to tell you what else. There were open septic pits. There were 55-gallon drums. There were, and if you get into really old houses, you'll find some of this stuff. But you've got to find, and that's generally somebody kind of was like, hey man, let's do a little septic work here. We're gonna drop a 55-gallon tank in the ground. And believe it or not, that actually it works. It rusts and it collapses. And so when it collapses, of course, now you have a giant hole in the ground. But they are modern septic tanks are incredibly safe, and they actually can drive a truck on top of them. Just don't. It's not a good idea. So, John.
Well, Larry, thanks for this the tutorial on septic tanks.
So we dispelled the myths, right? We dispel. I hope we dispelled the myths. It's not anything to be afraid of. If you're buying a house, right, I would suggest you have your septic tank inspected. You might require that it be pumped, unless they can prove that the tank's been pumped in the last couple of years.
That's what I was going to say. In all seriousness, when I get together with my neighbors, when I talk to them, and that subject comes up because everybody here has a septic tank.
Right.
And I never hear anybody complaining. Never.
Right.
And the only time that people have their septic pumped is if they're selling their house.
Well, I would tell you that's not a great idea, but
the deal is that really it doesn't happen all that often. Number one. Number two is nobody I know has had real problems with it. I think that dispelling all these myths about having it, in all seriousness, you just don't even know it's there, to tell you the truth.
Right.
Just maintain it.
Yeah, maintain it. And I mean, in the industry, it really, like having it pumped, just for example, I'm just going to throw this out. In the industry, probably it's determined mostly by the amount of water usage that you use. So, for example, if you have teenage daughters, you're going to pump your tank, and I say daughters, and I had 2 daughters, and I can tell you that they used, a huge amount of water and toilet paper, for that matter. So yes, that means I need to have my tank pumped a little more often, or at the time a little more often than I do now. Now with just 2 people in the house, our tank keeps up really well, and we'll probably pump ours every 5 years, but that's only because
that's probably about right.
Yeah, and that's what most people would say. They'd say do it every 5 years. You're going to be super safe. Like you, John, I can tell you. I mean, I know hundreds of people that haven't had their tank pumped but once in 20 years. And it's not uncommon. It's just a question of leaks. And is it bad for the tank? No, not really. What it happens is when they go to pump your tank, they're going to pump a lot of sludge out of it. It's called sludge. They're going to pump a lot of sludge out of it. And that's just what it is. They don't pump that much sludge out of mine, but that's because I'm super proactive about it, But it's not a big deal. So anyway, anything else have we missed anything? But I mean, a septic tank. You know what? I like septic tanks. I would rather have one because I'd rather be off the grid.
I agree. And you look at the cost savings. I'm fine with that.
So the other day, I was out in the yard, and it was night, and this stuff landed on me, and I look up and I think, is that the Dave Matthews Bus? No, it's not. John, it was a spaceship.
Was
John.
that the spaceship?
It was the spaceship.
That was the spaceship with the bumper sticker. We're number 1 and the number 2 business.
That's right. Folks, with that, along with our bad jokes, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please send us an email, questions@Handyman Pros Radio Show. We also would ask you, please, folks, we are working on a campaign right now to go out and get some Apple reviews. So if you like what we do, including our bad jokes, please leave us a good review on Apple. We would really, really appreciate that. And if you can, join our join our Facebook group at Handyman Pros. It's actually Handyman Pros on Facebook. We're going to start putting up some polling questions to see what y'all want to hear about. So we're just going to start doing that stuff because we really want some feedback from y'all. We get a lot of good feedback and some really good stuff, and we're very fortunate to have y'all out there. But we just want to make sure we're proactive in doing what you want to do. So you can do that. You can send us an email. It's questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. Join us on Facebook at Handyman Pros. Twitter is at Handyman Radio. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.